Yeah! Alright, we're back again. Michael Zull here doing a video tutorial series for Westside Electronic Music. This is part 4 of our Wwise to Unity integration series. And today we're going to be, yes, we finally arrived, we're going to be working on our footstep sounds. We're going to be creating footstep sounds in Wwise for multiple terrain types to correspond with all the different terrains and surfaces that we're walking on in our map. Get those, nice and randomized so that they're not repetitive. We're going to show how reusing some of those sounds and stacking them can save resources, make the footsteps just sound better, and also enhance our randomization of those footstep sounds. Definitely need to get plenty of randomization going on with these footstep sounds. If they're very repetitive, they're just going to drive you nuts as you're playing the game. So we are going to work on that, and we're going to do a great job, and it's going to sound awesome. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so we're into our Wwise project, and we're going to start getting our assets imported in so we can get all these various footstep sounds set up the way that we want. Let me delete this. I'm going to do it again. And I'll give you a quick overview of how we're going to approach this. So I identified 5 different types of terrain that I want to create sounds for. Those are dirt, grass, wood, shallow water, and deep water. And so I created the assets, the sound files that I wanted to use for those footsteps in my digital audio workstation. I use Pro Tools, but you can use whatever fits your fancy. Logic, Audacity, Sonar, whatever. And I created a folder structure, a nice organized folder structure, which is going to help us getting these into our Wwise project. And I'll show you why in just a second here. So I have a footsteps master folder, and I have the different sound effect types that I'm going to use. Some of these are going to be layered together to create the sounds that we want. And we're going to import all of these except for the jump sound. That's going to be saved for a later video when we work further on our jump and landing sounds. And yeah, so you can see all the different categories of sounds that I made: deep water, dirt, water splash, water step. The water step is really a sand sound, but you'll see that more as we get rocking here. So I'm going to import all these in. We'll open up our audio importer, import audio files, and I'm just going to drag that entire footsteps master folder into the importer. And you see that it gives us options of how we want to import all of these folders and audio assets. And everything is set up the way that we want except for one thing. Well, first we can I change this to don't import? No, I can't. We'll just go ahead and import that anyway. Not going to be using it just yet, but I'll delete it out. We're going to change this, the master folder, we're going to change to a switch container. And a switch container is it uses game syncs. It's going to be switching between the different types of terrain that we're walking on, based on what surface we're walking on in our game. So we'll import all of this. And I've done it once already, so we'll just replace everything. And now you can see our footsteps switch container over here. Expand it out, we see all of our different subfolders, placed all of our audio assets for those placed into these random containers. And I can preview those random containers. Let's listen to dirt. We already have a single dirt footstep in our project. And so now we have 12, I think it is. And if I'm selected onto the dirt random container and I hit the space bar, it's going to play one of those sounds randomly. We'll go back to our designer view. You can see what's going on here, our general settings. And it's just going to play one of these at random every time I hit the space bar. So there you go. So we've got all of our assets imported, and the next thing that we want to do is we want to start setting up our game syncs. Okay, so for setting up our game syncs, we're going to go cleverly over to our game syncs tab, And we're going to be setting up switches to switch between the terrain types. So in our default work unit for switches, we'll go ahead and create a new switch group. We'll call it Footsteps. And let me move my coffee out of the way here. And within that switch group, we're going to create the switches for all of the different terrain types. So create a new switch, dirt, new switch, grass, new switch, wood, and two more, one for water, and one more for deep water. All right, so we have our switches set up. Now we'll go back over to our audio tab and go to our switch group. And in our general settings, so we're going to change in our general settings for our switch group, which switch group it is going to be referencing. It's going to be referencing our Footstep switch group. And we want to set a default switch that is going to be triggered in the absence of being, switched, by a trigger in the game. This is just going to be the default. So we're just going to set it to dirt. Don't see why not. And there we go. So now we see down here all of our different subfolders, all of our random containers, and then we see our assigned objects over here on the right-hand side. So dirt is our default, and the sounds that we want to play when we're walking on dirt are all contained in this switch container right here. So we're going to drag that over into our dirt, and there you go. And for grass, we're going to layer two sounds. We're going to add dirt, and we're going to add a grass sound in there as well. And now for our wood, it's going to be just the wood samples. Water, let me remember what I did here. It's going to be a water splash and a water step. And then our deep water is going to be a water step and our deep water sample. So we have all of these objects assigned for our switches, and we can preview them down here in our transport control. You'll see that the switches button is available, and you'll see the switches over here, for our Footsteps switch container as we're selected over there. And we can select between which switch we want to be listening to when we preview this. So this is without doing any mixing. There we go. There's our Footsteps playing randomly for dirt, and then we go to grass. This is a layer of our dirt and grass samples, each one of them playing a random sample from the samples that are within those random containers. There we go. There's a dirt and a grass sound for walking on grass. And we can switch to our wood. Wood sounds. We'll switch to water. There you go. And deep water. Okay, so we'll just do a bit of mixing here just to get started. Let's see, I just want to work with the ones that are stacked. So we'll go to our grass. We'll work with the two different random containers that are within our grass switch, and I think I want to turn the grass sound down a little bit. So grass, we'll bring that down, I don't know, like 4 dB, and then test it out again. There we go, that's a little better. We'll go to our water splash, and we'll bring that down some as well. Maybe 6. Change it to our water sound. Water. There we go. So now we have kind of a sand sound that comes from the water step random container, and that's stacked with the water splash. And I brought the water splash down a bit, so hear those stacked. And our deep water sound. Let's listen to that. And let's bring that deep water sound down a little bit as well. And we'll be back up here and listening to our, there you go. So you can hear our sand to step, and then the deep water sloshing sound playing with each one of those as well. All right, so just a bit of pre-mixing there, just to kind of get things, you know, sounding close to how we'd like them to be. And let's start drilling in a little bit deeper on our randomization here, and then we should be able to start getting these exported and popped over into Unity for testing. Okay, let's get some more randomization going on here for all of these random containers. I'm going to preview just by selecting the Dirt01 property editor and doing some randomization of the pitch there. And the reason I'm just doing the one sample is to try to get an idea of how much pitch shift I can do up or down and still have it sound realistic. So I set it up for 300 and negative 300. So that should be nice for these footsteps. So I'll disable it on that individual sample, and in our property editor of our random container, we're going to put pitch randomization on all of these samples that are in here. And remember that, you know, the children always inherit the properties of the parent, so we want to make sure that we're working with the parent, the dirt random container. And we'll set up our pitch randomization on here, 300 and negative 300. And we'll go ahead and just play some samples. It might be a bit much for some of those samples, so let's go to like 200, negative 200, and test that. I like it. All right, so one more thing we'll do here to try to keep the randomization as random as possible is we're going to mess with the the avoid repeating number. And I have 12 samples here, and let's avoid repeating the last 3. And that will do what you think it would probably do is every time it you know, picks a new random sound to play, it remembers the last 3 that were played and will not queue up one of those for the next random sample to be played. So that's some nice randomization going on for our dirt sounds. Very good. And you can go ahead and do the exact same thing on some of your other sounds as well. Maybe we can do it on our grass, and we'll add, you know, maybe plus 200, minus 200 here as well. That's cool. Let's go listen to our now grass switch of our 2 stacked random containers that we've applied some more. Oh, let's go back to our grass, and we only have 4 samples here, so let's just avoid repeating the last 1 that was played. Go back and listen to our grass switch. So that has our pitch randomization and our stacked random containers. So we get some nice randomization going on. Very good. So, all right, cool. So you can go ahead and do that with all of your random containers. Just experiment with the pitch randomization for each one of those to get them to differentiate themselves from each other. If you're working with a ton of samples and you'd like to prevent those from repeating too often, you can adjust the play type to avoid repeating however many samples were last played, and that should help out quite a bit for the randomization. All right, we're doing pretty good here. We're going to get ready to start getting this all set up to push over into Unity. So same as we always did, we're going to need to add this to an event. We already have a Footsteps event down here, a Footstep event. Right now it's just playing our single Dirt01 sample that we set up at the beginning of this series. And we don't want that anymore. We want our switch container. So we'll drop that in there. Yes, we want to replace it. And now when that Footsteps action is called by the first-person character controller, it's going to call this switch container and is going to be referencing triggers, based on the types of terrain that we're walking on in our map, and I'll show you how to get that set up. So let's hit F7, go to our sound bank manager. We look at our footsteps. It still contains that same event, but the event has been switched over to our switch container versus just a single sample. So we'll go ahead and generate that. And you can see that our footsteps sound bank was updated. No errors. 39 media items were pushed over into that sound bank, and we're all set. So we're going to go ahead and save our project and move on over to Unity and start getting our triggers set up. Okay, so we're back over into Unity, and we're going to start to see some things from our Wwise project that got pushed over into Unity. We didn't have any switches before, but now we can see our switches have been moved over into our Wwise picker and are available for us to attach to game objects. And that's the first thing that we're going to be doing here. And so let me preface this by saying that there are definitely better ways to set up these triggers. From what I understand, if you're working with a game developer, they could set up the triggers for you, or they could set it so that the various surfaces that you walk on, as game objects, are triggers. And then you wouldn't have to go and do the process that we're about to do right now. But with a map like this that hasn't been specifically set up by the developer, to have those triggers, those switches already built into it, you're going to have to make do and do it by yourself. So we'll get started on doing that. And pretty basic but laborious process that we're gonna work with here. So let's start first with doing our wood sound trigger. And we'll go ahead and just kind of get ourselves positioned here so that we can set up what we need. And what I'm going to be doing is setting up a bunch of box colliders that are going to trigger the footstep sound that is to be played, based on where the character is in the map. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create an empty game object, and I'm going to name that, let's see, like trigger colliders, footstep colliders. All right. And then for each one of those, I'm going to make another game object, create empty, and I'm going to name those the terrain type that we want to work with. So we'll start off with wood. We'll just go ahead and make all of our empty game objects for the different terrain types. Grass, create empty, dirt, create empty, water, and create empty deep water. Okay, and we'll move these inside of our footstep colliders object. This is just for organizational purposes. We can have them all in the same place. And we'll go ahead and get started with our wood. So what we're going to do here is make yet another empty game object. We'll call it wood. We'll call it wood 1. And throw that into our wood sub-collection of colliders. So now this is an empty game object, and we need to set up a box collider component on this game object. So we're going to go to Physics, Box Collider. And so we want to, this is going to be a trigger, and so we want to have the isTrigger checkbox selected so that it will act as a trigger And now we have our box collider here. And thus begins the laborious process of essentially just making a bunch of these, doing the best you can with coverage, and creating them all over the map based on the type of terrain that you have. So I'll just do, I'll just do a couple here just to, show you the process. And we can size them either the transform or the collider. I'm particularly using the transform just of the empty game object versus the collider size. So let's leave that as 1, and we're going to extend this out nice and long here just to cover this walkway and kind of get a rough idea of how large, what size you're going to need these things to be. We could increase the Y dimension as well so that it's just easier for our character to, to collide with this thing and line it up with our walkway, just, as close as we can. Right up towards the edge there. Oh, went too far with it. Right up to the edge of those wood planks. We'll make it a little bit wider. And there you go. So now we have a collider set up that's a trigger. So now we want to have that empty game object and that box collider. We want that to trigger it to change our footstep sounds over to our wood footstep sounds. So we're going to drag our switch from our Wise picker onto this game object. Trigger on AK trigger enter. And note how, when I selected another one, it didn't deselect start. So we want to go and deselect start. AK trigger enter is the one that we want to use. When we enter that box collider, it's going to trigger switching the footstep sounds that are being played from that collection of footstep sounds that we have for our various terrain types. So AK trigger enter, and the last thing we want to do is use other object. I essentially think that means that we're using another object to trigger it. It is this box collider. And you can see since we dragged it over as the wood switch, it already knows that we want it to be the wood switch. If you wanted to change it though, you can select which one you want to from here. And there you go. Now I'm going to make one more of these colliders in our, let's make it grass. Really what I'll do here is I'll just copy this and then paste it so that it has, it already has, most of the properties that we want going on. We're just going to have to adjust. We'll rename it to grass 1. And it's sitting right on top of our other one since it's just a copy. So we'll move it over here. I will do something like this and just make it, and just widen it up. And of course you don't want to, be sloppy like this, like I'm doing right now. I'll show you my completed project to show you all of the colliders that I had to set up to make this work. And but yeah, this is just for demonstration purposes. I can show you, switching back and forth between these two colliders and how it'll change the footsteps. So if I have them both selected, I can see them both there. My character's going to start here. It's actually going to default to the dirt sound, and I haven't. I won't have hit a collider yet, so it's going to play that dirt sound until I hit one of these colliders, and then it's going to switch over to the footstep sound that I want. And I didn't change this grass to the proper switch name, so we'll do that. And all right, so we have 2 box colliders set up there that are going to switch back and forth between the wood and grass sounds. So let's go ahead and test this out. So the first thing I'll show you is, remember, our default switch is the dirt switch. So we should hear a dirt footstep. We're not hearing anything on jump right now. But there is our dirt footstep. And remember that first collider is right in front of us here on that walkway. And we created our second collider here behind us on this grass. So just to preview our random footsteps playing that are defaulted to the dirt, I'll just not collide with one of those. You can hear much, much better with the randomization. They're not repetitive, not that single footstep sound like we were using before. And that's what we wanted. So now we're about to enter this trigger here that's on our walkway. So it should switch over to the wood footstep sounds, and it does. And that's playing samples from our random container. With some. I don't think I set up any pitch randomization on these. No, I didn't. But yeah, I'm going to be showing you the completed project to show you everything I did. And let's go ahead and go into the grass. So note one more thing here as I walk into the grass is there is no switch right in front of us to switch us back onto this section of dirt, to trigger the dirt footstep samples. So it's going to continue playing the last group that it was switched to. So you're going to hear wood. Still on the wood. Haven't hit another trigger yet. It's just going to keep playing those wood samples until I hit another one of those box colliders and have it, switch the footstep samples to something else. Which is why it's important when you go into your map and do all of these colliders that, you're going to have to do a lot of them and be very specific and very detailed so that you don't get essentially stuck moving on to a different terrain that doesn't have a collider set up on it, and it's playing, a terrain type that doesn't correspond with the actual terrain type that you're on. So anyway, let's go over to our grass here, and okay, we're on our grass. So grass, and again, no collider here, so it's going to stay on the grass, and now we're on our wood. And again, no other colliders, so it's just going to stay on the wood footstep until we hit another one. So I'm going to go ahead and fire up my other project to show you all of the completed box colliders that I created, and some more of and just show you how this all ended up sounding. So let me shut this down and fire up that other Unity session, and we'll check that out. Okay, so I fired up my completed project to show you the result of getting all of our footstep colliders set up in our project. Called them footstep switches in this one. Same thing though. And you can see how many colliders I set up in this. I didn't go too overly crazy in this one either. If I were going to utilize more of the map, I'd set up more of the water sound effects over here, transitioning to different terrain types as well. But I just wanted to give a nice clean demo of just the village area. So there's all of the colliders that I had to create for the various types of terrain. Here's all the ones for wood and dirt, grass, water. That's just for the water's edge. And then I just duplicated those and moved them out a little bit to do the deep water sound. And we'll go ahead and play test that, and you'll see how this all came together. So I'm on my dirt, I'm on my wood, and I got pretty specific here. So we're back over to our dirt sound, and we have wood inside this building here. Back to the dirt and back to the wood. So there you go. And there's our warrior princess and our lovely horses. We'll take a look at some of that stuff in a couple videos from now. But anyway, so here's our lake, and when we're stepping in the water, we want to hear that. And there we go. And then if we go deeper into the water, there's our deep water footstep sound. back to just stepping in the water and back to our dirt. So the last thing was the grass. And there's our grass. So grass to dirt to on these wood planks. Our torches, and so there you go. That gives you an idea of what the completed project will sound like. It's a lot of work to get all those colliders set up, and but it's got to be done. That's the only way that I know how to do it without working with the game developer on the graphic side. To set up those switches for you and have it easier to integrate. So you're just going to have to create all of those box colliders and get to work. So have a ton of fun doing that. I know I did. Took me about, I don't know, a couple hours to set up all those colliders. So I think there's one more thing that I wanted to do, and I'm going to pop out of here and change a setting real quick so that we can take a look at one more thing before we wrap up this this Footsteps video. So let me pop out of here. Okay, so this is the last thing I'm going to show you before we wrap up this this Footsteps tutorial. One more video coming up on tailoring our footsteps. It's going to be working with the jumping and landing sounds, but we'll get to that when we get to that. For now, what I want to show you is one of the settings for limiting the number of instances of a sound that will play simultaneously. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to disable one of the options that I have going in my Wwise project, and it's going to be for the deep water sound. So if we listen to that deep water sound, you can see that it plays for, I don't know, 4 or 5 seconds. And when we're walking through the deep water, it's going to trigger that sound every time that we take a step, and you can see that the steps happen pretty quickly. So that could very quickly have 20, 25 instances of that sound playing at once if we don't limit the number of instances that will play. So in my project, what I did in the for the final mix was limited the number of instances to 4. I'm going to uncheck that and just let it play as many instances as it wants, and we'll see how that sounds. And we'll generate our sound bank again so that it updates that change setting. See that our footsteps bank got updated. We'll save this and pop over to our Unity project, and let's go play test how that sounds. So we're running over to our water, and this is with no limit on the number of those deep water sloshes that will play. And we'll walk first. You can see, there's a lot of them playing at once, and it doesn't sound, too bad the way that it is. But we could clean that up a little bit by limiting the number of instances that are playing back and killing some of those voices, as the samples get triggered. So we'll go ahead and do that in our Wwise project and check out the difference. So we'll go back to our random container for our deep water sloshes, and we're going to override the playback limit that it inherited from the parent. It inherited an unlimited number of instances. So we're going to limit this one to 4 per game object. When it reaches the limit of 4 instances of that sample being played, it's going to kill a voice. Which one is it going to kill? It's going to discard the oldest instance that's playing back. So at any given time, only 4 of these will be playing in their entirety. As another one gets added, it's going to kill the oldest one, and you'll see how that cleans it up just a little bit. So we'll generate our sound banks. Footsteps has been updated. Save our project, pop back over into Unity. and we'll go ahead and play test that. So I'm gonna run over to the water again. Go find some deep water, and we'll go ahead and walk in our deep water. So you can see it becomes a little bit less of a just a, a washout. With all of those instances playing back simultaneously, it just got real muddy, real indistinct, and just having the 4 playback, you can hear each of them much more distinctly, and just cleans it up a little bit. And even though it's not the biggest difference in the world, it makes a difference. The cumulative effect of all of these small changes that you make in your mix are going to make a difference overall in the quality of your sound design. So pay attention to little details like that. It will help to clean up your games and make them sound better. I'm pretty sure that we're finished up with doing our footstep sounds for this video. So thanks for watching. Hopefully you learned something. Got these footsteps sounding nice. The next video that we're going to do is working on a little bit more on our footsteps. We're going to work specifically with setting up jumping and landing sounds, and some problems that we have with our footsteps in our previous project that haven't been addressed yet, that we'll address when we do our next installment. So thanks, and see you in the next one. And I'm out of here.